p.m. So thank you, Carolyn. So I'm Kathy Gleason, acting president of Turnagain Community Council. So I appreciate everybody's participation this evening. And like to introduce the TCC board members. Carolyn Hall is our treasurer, and Stephanie Quinn Davidson is one of our 2 at-large board members. And I don't see Ariel Wiggin joining in to this evening so far. She's our other at-large member. So so welcome, and Carolyn, if you just want to give a quick rundown of Zoom etiquette, I would appreciate it.
Sure. Welcome, everybody. Just super quick, if you have any questions or a comment, please either raise your physical hand or use the reactions in the lower portion of your screen to raise your digital hand. And please make sure that we are being as respectful as possible so that we can have a good meeting that does not get hung up with unnecessary banter. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, first thing we need to do is approve the agenda. It was sent out this afternoon, and I apologize for not getting it out sooner. Hopefully you got your email notice, and it was attached to that. So if I could entertain a motion to approve our agenda for this evening, I would appreciate it.
So moved.
Okay, Dan, is there a second?
This is Carolyn. I'll second.
Okay, thank you, Carolyn. Does anybody have any additions or amendments to the agenda as presented?
Hey, Kathy, this is Megan Peters. I know I can't vote on anything with the agenda or approve or anything like that, but I can't see it. Can somebody put it in the chat for me, please, so I can see where I'm going to be at? My apologies.
Oh, sure. And you're under regular reports, just kind of as usual, between probably 7:15 to 7:30, somewhere in there.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure. I don't like to presume that things are always going to be the same. So I like to ask so I'm prepared when you guys need me. Okay,
well, I appreciate that. I thought I did attach the agenda when I emailed you earlier, but I may not have. Maybe I missed that. Carolyn, I don't know if you want to screen share the agenda. If you can, just briefly before we take a vote on approving the agenda so everybody can see it. Is that possible?
Yes.
Sorry to be a hassle. I appreciate you guys.
Problem.
Are you able to see it?
Yes. If you want to just scroll up a tad and then scroll down a tad or reduce it.
Kathy, it was on the last email you sent. It just wasn't on the first one this morning when you sent me the link. I apologize. I should have paid more attention to that. Thank you.
That's okay. Okay, does anybody have any other comments with regard to the agenda? If not, is there any objection for approval? All right, agenda is approved. Thank you. Okay, we will move on to just letting you know that the May 4th Zoom meeting recording is available online. Thank you to Carolyn for getting that posted. She wasn't the one that was recording it for our May meeting. Someone else was, and he didn't get the link to us, or get it to us too early in the month, but it is now available and it is on YouTube. Is that correct, Carolyn?
That is not correct, because I did not get it today.
Okay,
but
Carolyn will. When she has time, because she's a busy woman, it will be posted on YouTube. Okay, and thank you, Carolyn, for taking care of that. Okay, so I've got a few announcements and then I'll open it up to see if there's anybody that wants to share anything as well. just that the Spenard Farmers Market is now up and running. So they encourage everybody to participate in that fun event. And hopefully the sun will shine on Saturday for the farmers market. Also let's see, the Clean Slate Strategy Committee Task Force that has been formed, which is also kind of under that umbrella of dealing with our homeless situation here in Anchorage. They wanted one representative from each of the council districts, well, not council districts, but city districts like West Anchorage. And so Spenard Community Council has a representative that's sharing everything with us, or presumably sharing everything with us. So they're going to start meeting soon. Tomorrow is their first meeting, then Saturday their second, and June their fifth. So this is there's 3 town hall meetings, and so they're coming up fast and furious starting tomorrow. So if anybody is interested, they're all at the library at the Wilden Marston Theater. Tomorrow it's 5:30 to 8:30. Saturday it's 1 to 4. Monday it's 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. So be sure and contact, let's see, who would be the best person to contact for more information on that? Any suggestions? I don't know. Carolyn Storm, you probably, I don't know if you're collaborating with this task force. You've
So
kind of got
Kathy, maybe I can just cover that
jump
under the
in.
assembly update.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
because I was going to talk about those anyway. So
Excellent, excellent, excellent. Okay, and then also just got a notice today that People Mover is looking at proposed route changes for some of their routes. And comments will be accepted through June 9th. So they're not giving a lot of people too much time to review this, and they're hosting in-person and virtual meetings. There's June 5th, June 6th, June 7th, June 8th, June 9th. But with regard to our area, the only one that I spotted that's going there where they're proposing changes is Route 40, which is the Spenard Airport route. And they're proposing that this route start and end at the Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport. Currently, it begins and ends at the Downtown Transit Center. And they say this will allow for better transfers between Route 65 and 40. So if you're a People Mover user, like to use the bus for transportation, you probably want to take a closer look at the People Mover route proposed changes, and they'll go into effect in October. So for anybody interested in that, I'm sure you could go to the People Mover website. So that's all the announcements that I had in particular. Does anybody else want to share any announcements briefly? No other announcements? Okay, we will move on. Let me just write that down. Okay, so now we're just going to have 5 minutes for anybody to share anything new in Turnagain in our neighborhood. Does anybody have anything they want to share, good, bad, or ugly, that's going on in our neighborhood? Anybody? Okay, we'll move on then. Could I actually be ahead of schedule? Is that possible? That's just not possible. We'll see how long that lasts. Okay, we'll move on to executive board report.
Yeah, Kathy,
So
can I just interject? I was a little bit slow on unmuting.
Oh, Lauren, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple of things. One is I've noticed maybe it's a slight increase in larger truck traffic on West Northern Lights. It certainly has going past our place. And I don't know if it's time to remind some of the service vehicles that are servicing the airport, that there is a better way to get to the airport that has less impact on our neighborhood. But I don't know if others who live alongside Northern Lights may have noticed the same thing. But I just want to say that. And then the other is, I did meet with John Haxby and J.L. McCary. J.L. McCary owns property on the far end of the proposed Fish Creek bike and pedestrian path, and John Haxby on the southern end. And there are conversations ongoing with the railroad and the people working on the bike path. And I just want to say that well, I've been asked to get involved a little bit, just to put some people together who may be interested in a better solution than what is so far being proposed.
Okay, well, that's interesting, Lauren, and under Land Use Committee, John will be providing an update that he got on that particular project. We're talking about the Fish Creek Trail Extension project between Barber Street, the end of it now, where it ends at Barber Street and then up through to the coastal trail. And keeping Turnagain Community Council in the loop on some of this stuff would be appreciated, because we're still trying to collaborate and pull things together and keep everybody informed about what may be taking place. But again, John Isaacs will be presenting information he learned recently with regard to the project. But it's good to know that there's folks working on these things, especially those who might be directly affected property owners wise, and see if we can't come up with better solution. I like that phrase, coming up with a better solution.
I had a question or a comment related to this, if I may.
Sure.
Oh, and that is, we've noticed in my neighborhood a lot of drag racing in the evenings, very loud, partly because we've lost a number of spruce trees, but I think there's just more of it. I don't know if this has been discussed before at the community council, because I don't always attend regularly. I was thinking of it too, because I recently saw a patient who lives in the neighborhood, and she was commenting about how bad that was, and we were both wondering about whether or not there was any effort by APD to look at that, the drag racing.
Well, that's a good question. We have not addressed that, although it has been brought up on occasion in the past. And I know that we hear it at our house at night. Just heard it last night. So I definitely know that it's taking place. It just seems to be a regular thing in the summertime, and I don't know if APD has really had their focus on that lately.
It's
Madam Chair, this is.
Yes, I'm sorry, just to break in. It's mostly motorcycles, and some of them are going very fast, probably in excess of 70 miles an hour.
Wow.
Madam Chair,
have you
this is
ever-
Sean
have-
Williams.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to add a couple things. One, completely agree with Lauren and the motorcycle drag racing, as well as the trucks. And I'm noticing that the trucks are from the post office.
Yep.
So I don't know if they have new employees or a new contract. It looks like new tractor trailers. It's not kind of what's been, what we kind of got rid of a while back. So I kind of wonder if there's like a new provider for that service. Yeah, the trucks are just different than they used to be, but you can tell it still has the same markings in it. It's related to the post office. The second thing is about the land use meetings. Can we have those sent out via the Turnagain Community Council kind of email program that you used for like today? I think that I see those and I get those, but I don't think that I've been getting anything about the land use meetings. I've been trying to track those down and without success. And that's all I have.
Okay, well, thanks, Sean. Well, you haven't got any notices because we haven't had one, I think, since March. Would that be right, John? So we're way behind on having them, and we will definitely be scheduling at least a couple in the very near future. We've got multiple land use related things that deserve a lot of discussion and attention. So you haven't missed out on anything, Sean, I don't believe, but 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 fasten your seatbelt because we will definitely need to hold some very soon on multiple things.
And,
Some
and Kathy, to add to that, I think March was the last one we had in the airport. We're talking about having one on the airport with the master plan being up and running, and also one on Title 21. Regarding the motorcycles, that may also be worth bringing by the airport to get the airport police, because I've been out there walking when the motorcycles have gone by. And it just seems like it's hard for APD to get there in time to catch them, but perhaps if airport police can be laying in wait, they might have a better chance, at least at that part of the Northern Lights.
John, folks, that my experience with this and not living but about a block or so away from those high RPM motorcycles, my wife and I used to be able to set our clock by when they went zipping by. This year, I noticed that their APD is parked up there by that Vitus, that old Shell station, and a few other places, and they'll be sitting there for a couple of hours. So I think that might be addressing it some. I've noticed that it's not that as predictable. So maybe there's some effort happening with that. Otherwise, it's been, Madeline, it's been absolutely incredibly annoying. And so I hope that will be continued with APD. I don't know if that's really the reason why it's been reduced some. Hey, but it's 8 o'clock, when they come zipping by. So.
Hey, Kathy, this is Anna. I had my hand raised.
Oh, sure, Anna, go ahead. And excuse me, Anna. Carolyn, why don't you go ahead and remove the agenda off our screen share so we can okay, thank you. Anna, go ahead.
Yeah, just to share really briefly, because just to say the whole issue of drag racing and speeding, I was at Bayshore Community Council and they were saying the same things happening down at C and 100th, those straightaways, especially where there's not a neighborhood, it's just the roads. So I know it's a citywide problem, or at least there's multiple areas. And I know one response has been that APD just doesn't have the staff. Just today I was at a graduation of 15 more officers, but they're stretched pretty thin. So I think it's worth bringing up, but I think that's also going to be the answer, unfortunately. And then just briefly on the postmark drive and truck traffic, I forgot to send a picture, but I did see a photo, or I did see a sign up that was, it had the airport logo and it said, basically reminder, trucks are asked not to use this road and not to use West Northern Lights. So obviously not everybody's following that, and it's just an advisory sign, but it is new. So I just wanted to flag that, Director Campbell must have had that put up after this discussion. So.
Yeah, that's been up for probably, I know Jackie Armstrong had brought it up at our last meeting, so I think it's been up for at least a month or so. I can't say the wording is, too earth shattering. It's too polite. But yeah, the airport did put that up, and so I think, and I know Jackie Armstrong, and I don't think she's going to be able to attend this evening, but she has consistently indicated that it seems like the worst offender are trucks going in and out of the post office. So she would know better than anybody if they've got a new provider or a relatively new provider, but yeah, that confirms what I believe she said in the past at our meeting. So okay, well, we need to move on. So this has been a good discussion, and I would encourage anybody to contact APD and lodge a complaint about the motorcycle racing. Yeah, when we said drag racing, I wasn't sure what was happening, but it sounds like motorcycles. And so, even if they cannot do much about it, they should be aware of it. They should hear from neighbors to know it's happening, so that if they ever do some kind of a concentrated focus on enforcement, then they've got some ammunition behind them to justify that. So
Yeah, I have one more point about that, which is Like I said, I've noticed there have been a few days where that hasn't been occurring. I don't know if that's because of the police effort or not. I'd sure like to know if that was, and I don't know who the contact person would be to get that information. So if anybody has an idea, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Okay, we're going to move on to the executive board report. And thank you for those who have continued to join in. Welcome. Let's see. So Turnagain Community Council does not typically meet in July or August. We take the summer off. But of course, we can have a special meeting. We can schedule a special meeting anytime if something comes up where we really feel like it's merited. We've got lots of big issues going on, so you never know. But right now, we don't intend to meet until September, and that meeting would fall on September 1st. In the meantime, we'll still have board meetings and land use committee meetings and any other ad hoc committee that we may form to address certain things. So it's not like we're taking vacation time here. It's just that we're not going to meet in July and August. And then by then we'll probably have before our September meeting, have a discussion by the board, whether we want to start meeting in person and or with Zoom, doing hybrid meetings, which could present a lot of challenges for us, but a lot of benefits as well. I'm just going to take an impromptu vote for those of you who are attending this evening. Would you prefer starting to meet again in person like we traditionally did before COVID hit? Or would you like Zoom to continue? Anybody have a preference? How about raise your hand if you would prefer in-person meetings? Nobody wants an in-person meeting. Oh, Carolyn. Okay, Carolyn. Okay. Steve. Anybody else? Dan. John. Okay, that's 4. Zoom preference. Okay, Scott. Tatiana. Lauren, that's 3. Kathleen, 4. Let's see, we got 5. Brian, anybody else voting? Jean, that's 6. In an ideal scenario, we do hybrid. I'm just not sure we're ready to pull that off yet. It maybe by September 1st we could. I'm not sure. Okay, well, looks like 6 prefers Zoom, and we'll just see what happens. Stay tuned. Let's see. So our next TCC board meeting, we actually didn't pick a date when we met on the 22nd for our next meeting. It definitely will be in June. We don't want to take the time to figure out that date now, but we'll definitely send out a notice when we do find out what works for us. It's going to be kind of a busy month for a lot of us, but we'll keep everybody informed so they're aware. And if you want to know and we don't get the word out, just always feel free to contact me or any other board member and say, when are you guys meeting? I want to be noticed, so that we'll make a list and make sure we contact anybody who specifically wants to know when we're going to meet. Let's see. So next we will have a report on the Federation of Community Council delegate meetings that has happened. There were 2 of them in May. And Carolyn, I don't believe you were able to attend either one of those as our delegate, but Dan Gleason as our alternate attended. So Dan, if you want to give a briefing of those 2 meetings that were held in May.
The first meeting was training for the OWL, which is hybrid. It's the how for hybrid for the and also setting up the OWL in the BP Energy Center. So that's where FCC set it up for their meetings, and some of the other community councils have used the VP Energy Center for their OWL meetings as well, since they have the facilities. The other one was, the main thing is Mark Butler is retiring from as executive director of the FCC, and his last day is June 30th. Hate to see him go, but he is retiring, and they are looking at we formed a committee to and executive committee to find a replacement. And we also formed another ad hoc committee to for vision and future, which I am a member of that committee. We are also we had a Mayor Bronson gave the mayor's report himself, and he talked mainly about the homeless issues with Sullivan and the other issues around homelessness. We had FCC elections where Gretchen Stoddard and Linda Chase were elected, and then congratulations to Carolyn Hall. She was elected treasurer, and I can't remember who the secretary was, or maybe Al, could you remember who was elected secretary, Kathy? I can't remember.
And you have my notes upstairs.
It's
So-
Amanda Moser was elected secretary.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, all right. Let's see, and community patrol program, and you need to make sure, I think at the end of June is when the grant program, you need to submit grants for the community patrol program. And there are two programs that are not in this area. We don't have a community patrol program. We did have one in the past, but the person that was working that passed away, and we never picked up after that person passed away several years ago. Let's see, what else? That is basically it.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Dan? Okay, thank you, Dan. Okay, also on the board report agenda here is Linary Park Citizen Naming Panel, which I do serve on. And we had our public hearing that's required by municipal code on May 24th to listen to get input on the proposed naming of 4 amenities at Linary Park, and see if anybody else wants to propose any other names for those amenities, or wants naming for any other amenities at Linary Park. So we I was appointed chair of the public hearing, chair of the naming panel. So I chaired the public hearing, and we had 7 people that testified, including Dan Gleason, who represented Turnagain Community Council, since I couldn't testify and none of the other board members were available to testify. So Dan stepped in as longtime member, past president, and extraordinary volunteer at Linary. So he read our Turnagain Community Council resolution that we had passed supporting the naming of 2 of the diamond fields after 2 Anchorage West Little League people that had passed away, unfortunately, John Opensky and Bob Durst, and then the tennis courts after the Hendrickson family, because they donated significant funds for rehab back in 2014 or something like that. And then Michelle
2013.
Byron. What, Dan?
2013.
2013. And then Michelle Byron whose name has been associated with the Memorial Garden there across the trail from the ball fields down on the lower level of Lynn Airy, that was created by her mother in her memory. And so, but none of them were ever officially named. So we're going through that process. Our next step, our committee, our panel is meeting tomorrow to talk about our next step, but it's proposed to be go before the Parks and Recreation Commission get on their agenda for approval of our recommendations as a panel on July 13th. So if anybody's interested, you might want to mark your calendar for that. So does anybody have any questions about that and the process we're going through for Lynn Airy Park? Okay, if not, then the last item under executive board report is, Stephanie, I didn't check with you beforehand. Well, as a reminder, at our last meeting, for those of you who joined us, there was a neighbor who lives on 30th Avenue right next to Lloyd Still Park. They're south of Turnigan Elementary School. Those soccer fields are used heavily in the summertime. And unfortunately, there's some negative impacts associated with that. Parking issues and trash and so forth. So a resident had come forth last month to see what Turnigan Community Council could do, or if there's any ways to modify the use of that park and for soccer. So Stephanie, you were going to kind of see what you could do, take the lead on that in terms of following anything that the council may be able to do. Did you chat with the soccer people or the neighbors or anything since we had our board meeting?
I haven't had a chance to chat with the soccer people, but I've tried reaching out to Parks Department and am awaiting a response.
Okay, excellent. Well, you can just keep us informed, and I appreciate you taking the lead on that. And hopefully, since neighbors have brought this to the soccer community's attention, they will, be a little bit more diligent on respecting the neighbors while they enjoy the soccer fields there at Lloyd Still Park. Okay. Let me write that down. Okay, that's the end of our executive board report. So now we'll move on to our regular reports. Is there somebody from the legislative community that has jumped in our meeting that could provide any kind of report? I did talk to Senator Matt Clayman yesterday, and he said he would be coming in late, like around 8:30 or so. So we'll just accommodate him when he's available later on in our meeting. I don't think I see any other legislative representatives to hear about the end of the session. So we'll move on from there and we'll wait for Matt later on. Okay, so assembly report. We have Anna Brawley with us this evening. Welcome, Anna.
Yeah, hi everyone, happy to be here. So I was just typing up notes because there's just so much going on that I was trying to prioritize. So I'm going to focus on a few things, and then one of which I know is on the agenda later. So I'll just briefly touch on the camping. But here, let me go back up to the top. So generally, I'm newly elected, but I completed my first full month on the assembly as of earlier, I guess the end of last week. So still getting settled, but as you guys know, there's a lot going on. So we all just had to jump in midstream, and we're still working to catch up. So also just to say, if you emailed me and I haven't responded yet, apologies, but I am working through the backlog. So but I've been following things like the citywide issues like housing and homelessness, as well as some kind of more district specific things like the Northlink project, which is not in our particular area, but involves the airport. So anyway, mostly just spending time trying to make sure that I'm up to speed and, following up. One quick note just before I move on to the others about the bus routes. I was looking at those as well. I'm an occasional bus user. There's actually two changes that don't directly impact our area, but just to say, one is the Route 40 which I believe just means that the route starts and ends at the airport, as Kathy said. The other one is that Route 85 does go through our area. So it goes down Northern Lights to Wisconsin, a little on Spenard, then it goes to Midtown and Diamond. And I don't believe there's a change to that route. It runs hourly, but the proposal is to combine part of that route with what's now Route 91, which that's further south, serves the Huffman area. And it sounds like the intent is to connect those two routes and then increase service for the folks on the southern route, so they can get that hourly evening and weekend service as well. So it seems like a good change. It doesn't seem like it would impact this area, but just to mention, that's the other one as far as people mover. And then the three big topics that I'll cover now, these are things that are actively on our agendas in the next month, plus a lot of other work happening. The first is the Port of Alaska. So that one, you guys know, we're still working on modernization. I think it was last month that the cement and petroleum terminal opened for the first time and got its first customers. So that's great. That's part of the overall modernization project. But the big thing that will be before the assembly is discussing the design for the cargo terminals. So the ones that are serviced now by container ships, as well as totes, kind of vehicle oriented ship, the roll on, roll off. And so that needs to be finalized and needs a vote by the assembly, as well as discussing a tariff increase in terms of, covering at least part of the cost of that. Of course, we're still also looking at federal and state funding. So there's going to be a vote on that on the 20th. Just to mention, I know that's, we all rely on the port and it's something that we don't think about too often, but that's going to be a big thing before the assembly later this month. And then the two other topics I'll cover are housing and homelessness. So with housing, we had a summit on a couple Fridays ago. We talked a lot about the barriers to building housing, to renovating buildings, the issues of our rents keep going up, the cost of housing to purchase, the low inventory. Basically all across the board, our housing market needs some help. And so we got some good data. We heard from experts, we heard from builders. We heard from folks who manage rental housing. We got a lot of good information, and I know that there's pretty much commitment by every assembly member to work on this, to at least find a piece to try to deal with such a big issue. So I'm still figuring out kind of where to fit into there, but expect to see more work on that. I know there's some ordinances that have already come out, making changes to our zoning code, and so I can talk about those, but I think it's just helpful to know kind of what the big picture of that is. And then also just to note on the area of housing, there are several projects that got assembly funding over the last couple of years, or municipal funding, and they're coming online. So two of them in our area are the former Lakeshore Inn. Now it's known as the Lake House. It's actively being leased up. It's over on Spenard in Wisconsin. Used to be a hotel. Now, like I said, it's basically small units, converted hotel rooms, a few larger apartments in there, and really filling one of our critical gaps, which is low rent housing. And not to say low quality, but just having a small space, maybe it's 400 square feet or, something that's basically an efficiency, being able to rent to folks there. And then similarly, the Barrett Inn, which is on the other side of the street, on Spenard, that one is not open yet, but it's being renovated. So you've probably seen work happening. They're getting the roof replaced and doing some other significant work there, and hoping to get that leased up, I think starting by the end of the summer. So again, really able to make more housing available using some of our existing buildings. And then of course, there's a lot of other housing projects happening across the city, some of which have some public funding, others of which don't, especially some downtown that are pretty exciting. So then on homelessness, the last big one, as Kathy said, there's a lot going on. I'll put some links in the chat as far as meeting times and notices, and really the longer version of what we're working on. But the short version is, so the Sullivan officially closed yesterday, May 31st. There was about 35 or 40 people there, folks with significant medical conditions. And then they were able to at least find a temporary situation for most of those folks. A few opted to not take one of those. A lot of folks are kind of stuck not having a long-term solution, but at least they're not all on the street right now. But it does mean that the municipality is not operating a public shelter at this point, which is something that hasn't been true for, I think since 2020, basically, or I guess last summer when they closed the Sullivan and then we opened it again in the fall. So, and I see there might be a couple of questions, but I'll finish up and then come back to that. So, in order to address that reality, and the fact that we do see a lot of folks camping because they have nowhere else to go. And by camping, I just mean living outside, not recreational camping. But there's 4 areas that the assembly and the municipality is working on. One is housing, like I mentioned. That's a huge barrier. There's more and more people who literally can't afford rent. And so they might have a car, they might be living in their car, they have a job even, and they're just not able to find rent or find a place to rent. So that's one area to focus on. The next one is the community-led task forces. So there's 2 of them, one of which is on the agenda, the sanctioned camping. So I'll hold off giving an update on that because we have Carolyn Storm who's been participating in that. But the other one is the complex behavioral health task force. And that one is really focused on this issue that we have folks, in shelter on the street who really need a higher level of support than just, an apartment. So they maybe have untreated conditions, they have medical conditions, they have behavioral health, meaning mental health that gets in the way of them dealing with their other conditions. And so that task force is working on recommendations ultimately to bring to the state and federal level to say we need funding and we need these programs that are funded at that level to be functioning. And so that's one. Other one is sanctioned camping, and the recommendations for both of those are coming forward in July. And of course, sanctioned camping, we'll talk about kind of the more immediate recommendations later. And then the last one I'll mention is the clean slate strategy for shelter. So this is also something Kathy had brought up. And I just want to be clear because there's multiple pieces going on at the same time because we know we have this urgent situation, right? and we need to look at the short term and the long term. So the clean slate strategy for shelter is led by Assemblymember Rivera, and it's essentially to look at where and how we could place and make sure that we're having well operated shelters throughout the city. I think there's been a lot of recognition that one big shelter doesn't work for the people in the shelter and for the surrounding neighborhood. And also we have a situation where historically the neighborhood of Fairview and that kind of North Anchorage area has really borne the burden of our homelessness needs for a long time. And so I think it's worth asking as a community as a whole, where else can we distribute those facilities? And for example, we have Clare House here not in Turnagain Community Council, but on Spinard Road. So how can we have more shelters like that don't seem to have huge impacts and are just basically providing, a place for people to be as they get their life together. So there's going to be several meetings and town halls. There's representatives from each of the districts to make sure that there's a balanced discussion and really, come to an agreement about something that I think this community has had a lot of conflict about for a long time, not just for the last 3 years, but really definitely well before I moved here from what I've heard from folks. So I'm hoping we can move towards solutions and really get a better situation than what we have now. And so with that, I know I shared a lot, but I will pause and see what we have for questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Anna. Let's see, Pat Redmond, you've
I
got your.
have a question.
Oh, Sean, hang on 1 second. I'll call on you next. Pat?
I just was wondering if there's going to be funds and how much funds are going to be available for repairs to Sullivan Arena to make it usable as the facility that it was intended.
That is a good question. I believe in the past there's been money allocated, but I think it was probably the last time it was closed. So I don't know the answer to that, but I can find out.
All right, thank you.
Okay, Sean?
Thank you, Chair. So Assemblyperson Brawley, I want to touch on 2 things that you said. The first thing that I want to touch on is when you mentioned that it was something to the effect of, I think what we learned is putting one big facility together for everyone to be at didn't work. And I would agree that it didn't work because it was sitting across the street from a neighborhood. So one big facility where there are no neighbors, I think some of us believe that might be a good idea. The second thing that I'd like to share is I'm really happy to hear that you guys are exploring making it easier for builders to build, and the Valley does a great job of making sure that the people who issue permits are working with builders and making sure that it's convenient and as much as possible can be done online and it's affordable. There's a huge difference between what happens in Anchorage versus in the Valley. I wanted to share that the Mayor's Economic Advisory Team has issued a report as far as recommendations that would make permitting easier and more accommodating and basically incentivize more development. I'm sure that if you reached out to his office or even Mike Robbins, he would have access to that report. You might find that interesting if you haven't seen it already. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And is that I think it's the Bend and Adams report, I've heard it called. Is that right?
No, that's a different report. This is actually put together by the AirDAC advisory committee.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll definitely follow up on that. And I know, yeah, there's been a lot of discussion about kind of the dual issues in the permitting center, which is, there's some kind of deep cultural issues as far as, whether it's customer service or whether, or I guess it's not as customer service oriented as it could be, is I guess the way to put it. And I know that's a deep organizational issue that needs to be worked out. And I imagine the recommendations in there touch on some of those things. The other one, just to say, is we don't have a building official. We are severely understaffed in most, if not all, departments. And so it's also challenging because in order to make significant organizational changes, you need the people to do it. And so I know that's going to continue to be a challenge across the board, but.
Yeah, I appreciate you mentioning that, and I hope that you can find it. If you can't, just go to Mike Robbins. He has a copy of it.
Okay, yeah, I will follow up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, who had their hand up next? Tatiana, and then Brian, and then we'll probably need to move on. So.
Hello, how are you guys? Thank you so much for so I have a question on a longshore housing. I actually did not know that it's being used for low income housing. I thought it was actually purchased by a school district in Yukon, Kuskokwim, for students to live in and have to come here to Anchorage for educational advancement. I didn't know that it was turned into the low housing project. And I have a question also on the Barrett Inn. Also, but wouldn't that be a bad idea to have two low housing next to each other for our community housing? How will that affect our pricing when we want to sell homes, especially across the street from the that longshore house? How is that going to affect that? I think it's going to be. Have we looked into that?
Yeah, those are good questions. So first, on the I want to clarify which property I'm talking about. So there's the Longhouse. That's the one that looks like a big log cabin. That's the one that was purchased by the Lower, I think Lower Yukon School District. And so that one is operating the way they said. There's no change to that one. I imagine there may or may not be students there in the summer, but maybe there is summer school. So what I'm just speaking of is what's called the Lakeshore Inn. So there's the little road that goes past McDonald's that connects up with Wisconsin behind Spenard. That has been a hotel, but that property was purchased earlier this year, and like I said, is already operating as basically apartments. And so I don't believe it's fully leased up at this point. And then the similar plan is for the Barrett to basically turn that into an apartment building. And like I said, because it's small hotel units, they can rent them much more affordably than say, 1 or 2 bedroom apartment. And so that it's really meeting a need. So I hear the concern about low income housing. I guess I would offer Spenard Road has several hotels, like the Chelsea Inn and places like that are de facto low income housing because they're just the most affordable thing you can find. And that our area does have a mix of apartments. The street I live on has everything from apartment buildings up to condos in various conditions. And so, I mean, I hear your concern, but I don't know that what's going in these properties is significantly different than what's been on Spenard Road for decades.
Well, as long as they don't wander into Wisconsin and start going into neighborhoods and scoping houses, that would be hopeful because there's some control of that, I'm hoping.
Yeah, I mean, it's not, the facility is basically rental housing. And so I imagine that comes down to, screening tenants and, folks are paying lease, or they have leases and they're paying rent there every month. And I think, I can't speak to all of them, but I imagine most of them have jobs because they have income to pay their rent. So,
Okay, well,
yeah.
Okay, last one, Brian Evans.
Hey, Anna, thanks for what you're doing for us. Hey, real quick, kind of, you've been there a month now. In your eyes, what's the end game on this homeless problem? Right? I mean, the millions that we spent kind of chasing this thing, it kind of looks like a runaway train, and we keep trying to fix it, but I don't know what the end game is here. Is the end that we have no homeless in Anchorage, or that everybody has a place to live that's, they're taken care of? I mean, I don't know where, I don't know what success looks like to us as members of the community. Do you
Yeah,
have
I think that is a good question. And I think I think it's something that we're still figuring out how to define, right? But I think it is helpful to keep in context. So we have actually made significant progress, but at the same time, there's a lot of forces that are bigger than this city that are creating conditions for more homelessness. Like I mentioned, rent going up, and the fact that we're not adding units to our inventory for the most part is in the city as a whole, means that folks who don't have enough money to afford higher rent, are kind of stuck because you can't pay half of your rent. And so that's kind of that's a bigger issue across certainly the West Coast. And we're seeing it more and more in places where there's limited housing and the costs go up. So that's kind of one big piece. And so that's hard because it's, the city can't fix the entire economy, right? And so so we can do what we can. We can try to add units. We can try to jumpstart our economy again locally. But at the same time, we are making investments, and we have made, like I mentioned, these housing projects. Those are serving folks who are coming directly off the street or coming out of a shelter, and able to basically stabilize and get their life together and maybe move up to a larger apartment or buy a house eventually, kind of move up the ladder. And then we're also investing in housing, like Providence is putting a fair amount of money in permanent supportive housing for folks, again, with complex medical needs. So those folks who otherwise would be in assisted living, but don't have the money or don't have the Medicaid waiver to live there. And so I think we're making some progress, but it is hard to see it as progress because it feels like the issue keeps increasing, again, because more and more people are becoming homeless for economic reasons. And so so in terms of the end game, I think we're trying to figure out how to make smart investments. We're trying to fix the housing market because that really affects everybody, not just homelessness. And I don't think it's realistic to say we're never going to have anybody experience homelessness in the city, but we can do better, I think, in having places for people to go when they are in crisis. So having a shelter where, kid gets kicked out of the house, or someone gets divorced and they don't have enough money for two security deposits on 2 apartments. Where does that person go short term? And so I think that's probably what success realistically can look like, is not that the only answer is that you end up on the street with a tent.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Good question. Okay, well, thank you so much, Anna, for a great assembly report. So do we have anybody from the mayor's office here this evening? I don't believe so. So we'll move on to school board report. So Pat Higgins, welcome.
Thank
Board is
you.
yours.
Well, I'll start off by saying, with the past election, one of the things we do is we always do a reorganization and shifting around. We've kept the same officers, no change on the school board. So Marco's still president, and works his way down. Paul is vice, and so we've got the same officers. We also, every year, we rotate what community councils different school boards represent. So this will be my last presentation for the time, because there will be somebody new. I don't have the list in front of me. I should have had this list at least, right? but I didn't. So, but you will have a new school board representative starting in July. So I'll share that with you. A lot of activities going on. We had, of course, the budget approved by the legislature. We'll see what the governor does. And the one-time funding is a substantial amount. But the big issue is going to be, have they got a long-term fiscal plan? What are they going to do with our budget in the future? And we have to prepare a budget now where there was no long-term adjustment, just a one-time funding. So we're going to start that process. We're working on it now with the budget. Do I think there'll be some school closures? Yes, but I think there's not just financial, there's some administrative type issues in regards to what people think is how it's going to function best. I think we're going to see some proposals. What the board will do is up in the air in regards to it. Of course, the school starting times has been postponed a year. And that's really to gear towards giving parents and the district or the all of it an opportunity to figure out how to handle child care issues with the change in times. It makes a difference, and we've got more and more less resources in the community. It seems like with facilities capable. We've got so many less people working in Alaska. Was it? I think Freed said 27,000 less than 10 years ago, and it's hitting everything. It's hitting the filling positions within the school district. We've got a lot of teachers leaving, retirees, and so we're going to be struggling in that way, just like we did before. We put a lot more money into food service so that we can make sure that we get or try to keep all the schools with lunches, which is really critical. So that's a big issue. In the paper today is Turnagain is Inlet View. And what we're doing with the funding that we have left over from the state, we had a substantial funding as well as some other changes in funding. And what the administration was asked to do by some school board members was to come back with a change that would provide, I think, $25 million for the Turnagain arm. That's and then the issue becomes, oh, we're going to fund a new Turnagain arm, or we'll be renovating it. I think the best way to look at that is what happened on the base. You got Ursa Major there with major problems. The government looked at it and said it didn't make sense to fix it when you got this much in repairs. And so they're going to throw in 80% to build a new one. We have to put up 20. We're going to support that, I'm sure, and make the change. What we've got with Inlet View is that within the plans within the district of different schools, there's a view that Inlet View is part of that. And so the question is, how are we going to address that? Do we put in the money necessary for renovation, which is about $25 million, or do we put in enough money to go ahead and replace it and add another 10 to 15 million? The lifespan expectancy is much more. We'll accomplish more with a new school, but will we ask for funding to do that? If we fund the renovation amount, then leave it up to the public with a bond, or will we have some other way? There isn't any discussion right now within the board to reach any consensus on this, and we comply with the Open Meetings Act, so I can't tell you what everybody's going to do. And I'm not going to try to, I like the Open Meetings Act very much so, and I wouldn't try to violate it, but it's going to be a hot discussion in that in regards to it. If we go with the additional money to build the new school, that could be on the bond. It would be a smaller bond, along with some other critical issues, and we'll see what would happen within that. But that's open up there. Putting as much money as being proposed right now into it is going to assure there'll be funds to keep Turnagain going, put some major investment to keep it going. But whether it's new or not depends upon the additional money. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. There are no voting taking at this point. I would say, though, in October, November timeframe, when they talked about Turnagain, there was some view about not building it, like from where Dave Donnelly was raising that question. He even proposed putting over 20 million into it just for renovation. So there's a lot of support right then, but it was undecided on what to do. So it will be a big issue coming up. Figuring out what to do to increase academic scores is everything. Some changing the schools, the size of them, is linked to that. Changing sixth graders to go into middle school concern there is that it's going to benefit a lot of kids. It's going to be some kids we're going to have to make adjustments for to help them with it. But that's going to be a factor that will take place over the next 2 years as well. And then, of course, some curriculum changes on top of that. So there's that plus the budget, a lot of things going on, and a lot of uncertainty with the funding is what's going to drive a lot of the budget. We've got to have a budget on time next year. And with the decision to go with one-time funding without a long-term source of funding within the state that's going to balance things out with some increases, it's going to be difficult. The last thing I'll mention is, well, school board is always focused on trying to look at some studies and information, what's best practices and the like. And one of the things that we've compared ourselves to that we provide to the legislature was the Picus-Oldham study, that with 36 states have maximum effective classroom sizes. And so their kindergarten through third grade is 1 to 15, above that 1 to 25. We've got above 25 in kindergarten in many places. And so we're way behind the funding or what's adequate funding compared to the majority of all states. And we academics are impacted by that. So that's a serious issue that we have. We gave an updated report. We had a review and updated it. Again, this is the report that the court systems in the lower 48 have used to establish what is adequate. And we're, the $150 million under, considering how many students we have and how much we have for staff and sizes. And I will say that study reflected also the number, it looked at the administration and what should be cut or what should be administered in that. So a lot of studies going on, a lot of review, the classroom sizes. Once again, that was all academic related. I think the board is heavily focused on the fact that our academic scores are poor. We've got to address that. We've got to do better for the kids. And we're trying to make changes to do it at a time where decreased funding has been an ongoing situation. We can't let that stop us from increasing academic scores. No excuses. And that's what I'm shooting for. And we'll find out how it goes, and I'll open it to any questions at all.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Pat? Thank you so much for providing good information, and thank you so much for being our representative from the school district for this last session.
Thank you. I appreciate it, and I've enjoyed it.
Yeah, well, good luck with your next council batch, and we'll see who shows up on September when we meet.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Pat. Okay, now we are shifting to the airport report. And Megan Peters is here for this wonderful topic. So go ahead, Megan.
So first and foremost, I want to apologize because when I first sent out the airport update, I neglected to include a note that the master planning is underway. There was a public meeting the other day. The plan kicked off. It's been about 10 years since they've done a master plan. Essentially, they are looking at a comprehensive study that describes short, medium, and long-term developmental plans to meet future aviation demands. And if you missed the public meeting, that was the other night, there is hosted online a virtual public meeting. It will still be available until June 13th. And the address for that online is www.ancmpu.com. ANC is for airport code and MPU is master plan update. So there's going to be a lot of information on there that people can deal with. Each community council that borders the airport has representatives. If you have concerns, please talk to your representative that is sitting in on those discussions. It would be very helpful to keep the concerns funneled through that point person. That's a part of that master plan negotiation. I don't even know what to call it. I don't think negotiations is the right word. It's just the process. Parking limitations, they continue to be a concern at the airport. Our parking garage for the south terminal is still at half capacity. It's probably going to be that way until at least October. please, please, please keep that in mind. If you have to go to the airport to catch a flight, have a plan in place to either have extra time to go to the auxiliary parking spaces, off-site parking places. We have a web link that really describes all the options, the best to our ability on there. If you're coming to the airport with an RV, please do not pass under the Terminal Loop Bridge. Every single year, we have people crashing into it because their vehicles are too high for the infrastructure. And I know that sounds absurd, but it's a repeat occurrence. And unfortunately, well, last year we got upgrades to that section of roadway, so that space is even further diminished. So if you did luck out before with your RV, you're probably not going to luck out again. There's big flashing lights warning people not to pull in under there. There is an easy place to pull off to the commercial curb. If you already know you're over height, you might want to pick somebody up on the upper level. Just make sure you communicate that with whoever you're picking up. That is really important because not only will it cost you a lot of money to fix whatever vehicle you have that rams the bridge, there's going to be a cost associated with potential damage to the infrastructure at ANC, and we want to avoid that for everybody. Lake Hood Seaplane Base is back into regular operations. We do want to remind people that with the summer months, there's going to be a lot more people out there with their airplanes going out flying. Airplanes do have the right of way on all horizontal surfaces surrounding the lake, whether it's a parking lot, a taxiway, or an actual roadway. An airplane wins. Keep your pets leashed. That's for their safety and also the safety of people in the airplanes. Right now, we do have something that we know that is of interest to the neighborhood. There is an invitation to bid for a land lease that is commonly referred to now as the K-Lot, which does border up to the gravel strip and also to a neighborhood. For anybody that would like, the invitation to bid packet is public information and it is free of charge. However, we do need to track whoever receives that information. The reason they do that is so if there's any amendments to the invitation to bid or clarifications, everyone has to have the same accessibility if they are potentially going to be bidding. So you do have to request that specifically from Taylor Beardsley. In the update, there is his email address and his phone number that you can reach out to him to get that. It goes through all the specifics. I cannot speak outside of the information other than the packet is available. It's a very specific process. Everyone needs to have the same upfront information. There's a lot of rules that need to be followed, and leasing is not my personal specialty, but I do want to make sure that everybody does know that if you want a copy of that packet to see what it contains, you are entitled to it, but please request it through Taylor so we can keep everybody appropriately updated with the exact same information. The process essentially is people can't be treated differently with it. So we need to make sure everyone gets the same information, exactly the same information. I'm sure you guys have all noticed it's June now. So moose have been having their babies. Wildlife have been having their babies. We really do want people to know that the moose can potentially show up anywhere on airport property and surrounding airport property. We want everyone to stay safe. Do not approach a moose, especially if they have a calf with them. They're overly aggressive this time of year, protecting their young ones. So please be mindful of that. We don't want to have any issues. We do have our police and fire on property. So if there's an emergency, they can respond to assist, but we would just rather avoid confrontations altogether. Moose show up in parking lots. They show up on the roadways. They show up on trails. Just be mindful and keep your head on a swivel. We do have upcoming road construction around Lake Hood this summer. It looks like the majority of that, though, will be in late July, early August. So more on that can come in future airport updates. We just want people to know that there will be congestion and potential detours around the lake this summer as we go through it. And hopefully weather cooperates so it's done sooner than later. If you're looking for a career change, we got lots of open positions at the airport that are actually state jobs. Even if you're not interested in a state job, there's so many employers around the airport. There's always somebody that's hiring. So if you have loved ones looking for work, just tell them to look at the airport. There will be a business that is looking for people. And sign up for the Gov deliveries. That's the easiest way to get the most accurate information, whether it's on an OPN notice, any kind of lease notices, any press releases we put out. We really use Gov delivery as our most efficient way to delivering messages directly to people's inboxes. I know we say this every single time, but we don't want neighbors to miss any important news. And I can't stress it enough that Gov delivery is the best way to get it directly to you. So you don't have to go online and search through the OPNs yourselves. We try and push them out as timely as possible. Okay, I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Megan. So does anybody have any questions for Megan about anything she covered?
I do. I have one question.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So, Megan, as far as the land lease information bidding, you said Taylor, but I didn't get any more information than that.
Oh, I'm sorry. We sent out a, so my monthly update that I do, I also send that out to Gov delivery. Your community council gets that. I assume that they post it for its members. So Taylor Beardsley, I'll spell it out for you since you're asking. He is a land lease specialist. It's TAYLOR Beardsley, BEARDSLEY at alaska.gov. That's probably the best way to request the invitation to bid packet for your own edification, or I mean, maybe you want to be a bidder too. I don't know. That's fine. His phone number is 907-266-2458. And to make it convenient for you all, I will go ahead and put that information in the chat. I will also include the link for the public notice, so you guys can go and see that, and all of the attachments, the what's that word? The attachments. I'm sorry.
Memory file.
Yeah, I'm getting a little bit older. The words don't always want to come. I apologize for that. But I'll go ahead and I'll put the link in for the public notice. I'll put Taylor's email address and I'll also put Taylor's phone number for you in the chat directly. But it should also be in the airport update that your community council posts and makes available to you all, that I also send out every month on Gov delivery.
Okay, thank you, Megan.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So I did send out the this month's airport report with the council meeting notice that went out earlier today. So that was a click here attachment as well. And so thank you for providing that, so I can send it out with our meeting notice every month.
You're welcome. And I do apologize for not including the fact that the master plan was underway. That was a complete oversight, and it will be posted on our version when we post our airport update online. But the community meeting already passed, and any other future meetings will be public noticed, and we will also make sure that the community councils do not miss them. We do want everyone to be as informed as possible.
Yeah, thank you. And just as John indicated on the chat, he is the Turnagain Community Council representative on the Airport Master Plan Update Stakeholder Group meeting group, and I'm the alternate. So that was a meeting that was held yesterday afternoon, and I don't know if we want, John, if you want to kind of just dive in here in a bit. To just give a really brief overview of the two meetings that happened yesterday. But before we do, this invitation for bid with regard to this lot area, this lease area that's in Turnagain Bog, southeast of the gravel strip. I was hoping that, I don't know if you can, how much you can cover this, Megan, and I want to be pretty quick because we got to try and keep on schedule here. But when we had met with the airport in the past, when there was just one lease applicator, somebody that had submitted a lease application for that property and to develop some tea hangers and other facilities, the lease area went right up to the boundary of the Turnagain neighborhood. And so we had issues with that because that's just too invasive. And we asked for some wooded boundary buffering area between the fence line and the lease lot. And so now, because there was a second party interested and it's going out for an invitation to bid, I noticed on the paperwork that there is 150-foot distance between the Turnagain neighborhood chain link fence down there and the area that's going out to bid for lease applications. However, it's not to be used as a buffer area, which is what we asked for. It now is designated for airport development of a road and utilities. So in essence, that area would still be completely cleared out. And so I don't expect you to really address this, but I want you to take it back to the airport and say that this is a really big concern for us.
I can guarantee you, Kathy, that everyone pretty much knows that that is a concern. I cannot speak to the specifics in the invitation to bid because I am not a leasing specialist and I am not allowed to speak to it. And all the information that is in the packet has to be the same and exactly consistent for everyone it goes out to. And I do not want to misspeak and I do not want to do anything to ruin that process because I am definitely not in that department. I do know that we have a previous master plan. We are currently in a master plan situation. The airport does have an obligation to develop its lands for the aviation industry. There are federal regulations the airport does have to follow. But I can assure you that your concerns have not fallen on deaf ears. I do not know what's going to happen with those concerns. I'm not going to try and land blast you with any kind of promises that I have no idea what's going to happen with because I don't deal with those negotiations. I don't deal with the master plan planning. You guys do have a representative on the master plan. You are an alternate.
I'm going to go ahead and, because you're mixing apples and oranges here, this is within the Lake Hood seaplane base area, and that master plan is not being updated. So
Lake Hood is also a part of Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport. I do think for the master planning purposes, they do separate it, but that's a separate master plan, as you said, and that's a separate process. And I do not believe we're currently in that area. I guarantee you, everyone knows the concerns of the neighborhood.
Okay.
Beyond saying that, I don't know what to tell you. Okay. I will go ahead and reiterate it for you.
We'll probably go ahead and move on to John, if you would just want to jump in and give a briefing about the airport master plan and especially what took place yesterday, since there were two different meetings yesterday.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. There were two meetings. First of all, there are two advisory groups that have been set up for the master plan. One is sort of a working group, which includes representatives of the community councils, other stakeholders like the municipality of Anchorage and some other tenants. And then there's a sort of an airline and other tenant user group meeting or group, which will also have a advisory committee. And they brought both of us together yesterday to provide us with an overview of the master plan, the schedule and the intent. And then I suspect we'll be meeting separately afterwards. And so they went through the schedule of the master plan, and this was sort of the kickoff of the purpose of the plan. They presented some goals and objectives that they wanted us to comment on in sort of a work session. And they've also asked for additional comments on that. So I've asked the consultant to send those to us so we can have a Turnigan Land Use Committee meeting to look at those goals and objectives and add some additional items to it. There are a number of other things on the website you ought to take a look at. One of the easiest things is if you look at the 2014 master plan, there's an executive summary that's worth looking through just to see what they had it in last time. And certainly one of the things they had in their last time is their ultimate build out was a north-south runway, that new one that would parallel the existing runway 3,000 feet to the west, would go through Point Warrensoff Park, go over the top of the coastal trail and into Cook Inlet. And there was also an item there which was kind of interesting about demolishing the north terminal. When I asked them the question, are they going to bring those things forward as conditions of this master plan, the answer was no. But I think it's worth looking at that and seeing what they say. One of their other options is to potentially look at how do they work with Fairbanks to share cargo operations with Fairbanks, which may affect what they ultimately build out here or not. So I recommend everybody to kind of take a look at that. We will hold a land use committee meeting, I think sometime within the next month, to go over the specific goals and objectives and what we might be able to add to that. We'll probably also coordinate to some degree with the other two community councils, Sand Lake and Spenard. Kathy, anything I missed?
Well, no, I mean, there was a lot covered, but it was just a good introduction of how the process will move forward with the master plan update. And I think it'll be an interesting one under this current manager, Craig Campbell. I think he kind of views the world a little bit differently than the last time there was an airport master plan, and so update. And so we'll see how things track, and we'll certainly follow all the meetings and opportunities to have a dialogue with the airport and submit comments and get questions answered. So thank you,
And
John.
as Megan said, you can also find the presentation they gave yesterday on the website, so you might look for that.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you again, Megan. I appreciate your time. Okay, we will move
Always
on.
happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So let's see, we will move on to old and new business, running a tad behind, but we'll see if we can catch up a little bit. This is an interesting topic that we have coming up. It was a short-term request on my part, so I profusely really appreciate Carolyn Storm, who's a municipal sanctioned camp task force member, to come and address what's been happening with regard to the homeless situation. Anna certainly covered it to a certain degree. We all know that there's a lot of issues surrounding unsanctioned camps all around our city that homeless are putting up. And so the effort to choose sanctioned ones that the city would actually pick, located around town, not concentrated in Fairview or downtown, or, in one place within the community. For those of you who are not aware, for the West Anchorage district, the task force has chosen an area near Cliff-Throw Center out on Heritage Land Bank land. Probably most of you are familiar with that. So when the board met, we just found out about that proposal and were shocked that there was going to be a resolution laid on the table on the 23rd, I believe, at the assembly meeting with no public notice, no time for community councils or anybody else to weigh in on it. And so that the assembly did vote to postpone that consideration of that resolution to approve those sites around town till their June 6th meeting, which is next Tuesday. So that's kind of where we're at. The board met. We came up with a lot of concerns, a lot of questions. And so Carolyn is graciously here attending our meeting tonight to not answer all the questions, but just give us a little bit of briefing as to the process of how this site was chosen, and what's going to be taking place with the task force moving forward. And also ultimately how we can get all of our questions answered. So Carolyn, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me to at least give you some overview of what the task force has been doing. I will address the fact that somehow in all the task forces that the Assembly has convened over the last, 2 months, it seems like some community councils feel like they haven't been invited to the table. And I want to be clear that all the task force meetings have been publicly notified, or publicly announced and put on all the websites and FCC. And I do want to address that because it came up again in today's meeting. Some community councils feeling like they weren't invited. And the response from one Assembly member was simply, this was publicly noticed, and it is also on the task on the community councils to be a little bit proactive and check what is going on with the Assembly to see how they could participate. So I understand how some community councils feels like they've been left out, and that was definitely not the intention. So one of the questions was who's been participating. Downtown Community Council, Midtown Community Council, East Side, there's 3 out there. There's been 2 representatives from there, Fairview, Mountain View. I'm probably missing 1 or 2. So that said, the task force has had 5 meetings as of today, plus a weekend work session for immediate actions. So Michael Fredericks, who is a facilitator, has been facilitating these meetings and came up with subcommittees, subgroups, because they're not a committee, subgroups for people to focus on: immediate actions, support services, operations and management, etc. The immediate actions group decided to elevate their concern that the task force was not doing something about getting ahead of the abatement that was going to happen at Cuddy as of now, and the fact that the Sullivan was closing completely by May 31st. So a subgroup of the task force spent a weekend forming this resolution. It was laid on the table. It wasn't even necessarily postponed. It just simply wasn't taken up by the Assembly at the regular meeting on May 23rd. There are a lot of questions about the sites that have been considered. And I want to assure you that these sites are very much spitballed as what is available, what is open, what does the municipality own, that we could set up, we could set up areas to provide services, provide some security to folks between now, like last week, and the end of the summer, with a long-term view that one of these sites could go through the winter if we could stand up the pallet shelters. I really wish the company who designs these little shelters didn't call them pallet shelters, because we think of as shipping pallets. They're little mini insulated houses. I'll just call it that. They're tiny. They're 100 square feet or less. So I would just like to say that there are 2 folks that are engaged with the task force that are working with the unsheltered on a daily basis. And one of those people really, really felt the need to get something stood up immediately before the Sullivan closed completely. And we did not make that happen. A lot of the whereas clauses and a lot of the sections in the resolution talk about the fact that this was a first step for the Assembly to take action and assess the sites being proposed, with the hope that at least one of them could be stood up quickly. So I can't answer a lot of the detailed questions that you have about Clitheroe. Because we did not have the time to assess all the ins and outs of that site. What is in the resolution is that the operations of each site would be put out via RFP, that a provider would not be able to manage more than 2 sites so that it was managed well. And there are a lot of stipulations in the management piece about sanitation, security, et cetera, and the sites that we did specify were given a maximum number because Michael Hughes from the health department had done a little mini study on sanctioned camps in other cities and what was their sort of minimum and maximum number that allowed for some sort of success rates. So, yeah, I mean, that's where we are. The task force is, we made some minor changes to the resolution today so that the assembly will take it up in a work session tomorrow. We anticipate it getting, changed significantly in the assembly meeting. It's not up for public comment. This resolution is simply a device for the assembly to take further action. So there's nothing in the resolution, that's not an ordinance, there's nothing in the resolution that will I don't know, like sort of upset the order of how things are dealt with in Anchorage. These are all recommendations. And I guess I'll just say it again, that the task force was tasked with coming up with recommendations by July 6th. And for the folks who sit on the task force who are already engaging with the unsheltered on a daily basis, felt like this task force needed to come up with recommendations faster. So that's what we were trying to do. And we all know that the can has been kicked down the road for too long. So this was a mechanism for starting something rather than doing nothing again.
Okay, well, thank you, Carolina. If I can just jump in though, because one of the key things that that in the end, after I exchanged emails with Assemblywoman Anna, is council should come up with their own alternatives. If we don't care for the Clitheroe site, if we've got too many concerns, if we think that may not be an appropriate site for one of these sanctioned camps, to come up with our own list. So my question is, how did the task force identify, regardless of the region, but we'll focus in on the West Anchorage district, the Clitheroe Center. And when I'm referring to Clitheroe Center, it's not the Clitheroe Center, it's near the Clitheroe Center. It's just easy to refer to it that way.
Sure.
On Heritage Land Bank land. And so, I mean, what other sites in the West Anchorage area did the task force even consider before, ultimately recommending this site, in the whole West Anchorage part? The council can't, we don't know what criteria you were using, what sites you've already considered and rejected. We don't want to duplicate anything like that if we're expected now to go off on our own to identify sites. If Clitheroe Center area doesn't seem to really be a good fit for one of these sanctioned camps. So maybe you can provide a little bit of information on how these sites were chosen, what criteria was set up to either say, yes, we're going to recommend this site for West Anchorage or South Anchorage, and no, this one got rejected because of this, and this.
The first criteria does the muni already own it? Or not? Is it wooded? Or is it flat and gravel? There are a lot of people who would prefer that all these camps get stood up in parking lots. And then there's an equal number of people who prefer that they don't get stood up in parking lots because that doesn't seem dignified. So we really just honed in on basically the 4 cardinal directions. And how could, of the sites that we thought of that were thrown on the table, there was not a lot in District 3. Sorry, I used to be District 6, so now my brain is a little confused. Anna, you're District 3, right?
Yeah, and I can offer some additional, so what Carolyn said is right. So we were thinking, because people did throw out ideas of state-owned land, state campgrounds, privately owned land. And so there's other locations that were in the version that was laid on the table, or almost laid on the table. There were other ideas, but starting with the muni-owned land, just knowing that, in order to have control of the site, meaning legal access to the site, it has to be publicly owned, or there has to be a private landowner that's willing. And then I guess I'll say too, I've been, for the last several days, I've been thinking about, is there another location in West Anchorage, which of course goes all the way from, south of Westchester Lagoon down to Bayshore now. We've got the airport, which is a large property, but that's under control of the airport. We have several parks and trails, many of which have campers on them now. But knowing that would be an issue. There's Connor's Bog, which is, a wetland, and is part of it's being developed as a snow dump site, or will be. I don't know where that is in the process. There's the Northwood Park, which has been a huge, or not just Northwood Park, but the private parcel next to it, which has been a huge unsanctioned camp and has been a point of neighborhood contention for a couple of years. I think it's subsided. There was floated the idea of the gravel, or the fill site that AS&G is using down in Sand Lake, but that's actually, there's a P&Z, it's going to the Planning and Zoning Commission, so that's actually actively being discussed. And then there's the commercial properties around Spenard Road and Diamond Avenue, or Diamond Boulevard, sorry, which in theory, one of those you could use a parking lot there, but most of those are occupied or are next to businesses. And so when you start really narrowing down, even if you're looking beyond city-owned properties, it's kind of unclear, what the options are. And I think, just to emphasize what Carolyn said too, I think one of the really hard, but I think worthwhile things that this task force took on was, how do we spread the impact of these sites beyond just the neighborhood of Fairview, which I think has been, the default for this community for many years, because it's easy to say no, and then it all ends up there, right? And that's what happened with the Sullivan last fall, and up to, yesterday when it closed. And so I think, I think and that's why I guess I asked, I put it back to the community council, not because it's your guys' issue to solve, but just, we're all trying to imagine, where else are people allowed to be this summer? And then if the only answer is Fairview again, that's not going to be acceptable to the Fairview community or those 2 representatives from that district. And so we're trying to make a good faith effort, I think, as the assembly, as the community as a whole, to say, what is the alternative? And how do we spread that out a little bit?
So,
Okay.
Chair.
Oh, go ahead.
Chair, I have a question. This is Sean Williams. So Carolyn, I have served on task force before, and I understand the concept of, coming up with recommendations for the assembly. And I want to thank you for your work. And it's not something that I'm sure you took on lightly. But I also want to share that hosting public meetings is not the same as inviting your neighbors to the table. And waiting several weeks, to invite your neighbors to the table, so to speak. I think a lot of us in the room are probably wondering, okay, so who picked this spot? And I don't know if you guys realize, but it's literally 3 miles down the end of Northern Lights. I mean, are these people supposed to like literally trek 3 miles down there to the Cliff Road parking lot? And you know, it just kind of seems a little unrealistic. But I do want to say thank you for being here tonight and sharing, you know, the status. But I would just encourage you to really, you know, reach out to the stakeholders a little bit sooner in the process. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I totally appreciate that. I didn't convene the task force. So I feel like that's on the assembly person to, you know, notify. So I'm just gonna sidestep that because I'm not responsible for not inviting all the community councils to the table at this point.
I have to disagree with you. I think it's the task force responsibility to reach out to the stakeholders. I mean, that is pretty much how that works.
Okay, Stephanie, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to Carolyn because you're a volunteer in this position and addressing the situation that our city, our municipality is facing with people who are experiencing homelessness is not an easy task. And I just want to thank you for volunteering to do that. This isn't any ordinary task force. This is one that is tasked with, I mean, grave implications, right? And I just want to say that I think what I saw some documents about this, I think maybe in minutes or something from the task force meetings about this site, and that there would be transportation out there provided if this were a site that actually gets proposed. And so I just wanted to address that I think that is part of the plan for this site should the assembly decide to move it forward, that they would provide some transportation for people out there. I mean, you think about like what Anna was saying, there really are no other places in West Anchorage. No place is going to be perfect. There's going to be concerns about every place that comes up. You know, there's the pros and cons, and we just have to weigh that. And if we sit around for 3 more months and debate where to allow people to camp in a safer environment and a more managed environment and a place where they're more likely to have access to services, if we sit around and wait for that for 3 months, I mean, that's not going to do any good. The issue is now, and I think we need to allow some grace to the task force that they didn't reach out to every single community council. One of the things that we do when we elect public officials is we put our trust in them that they are representing the will of the voters. They are representing what is best for our city. The people that we voted decided to convene this task force or allow that this task force be put together. And the task force, they respond to the assembly, right? They report back to the assembly. And I do believe like it's up to the assembly to do their due diligence and reach out to constituents on issues like this. But I just want to caution my neighbors that we are in a very, very challenging situation and time for our city, and nothing is going to be perfect, but we need something better than what is currently happening. And we need to be better neighbors to our other neighborhoods who this issue has fallen on their shoulders for far too long. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks so much, Stephanie. I've got Dan and then Pat, and then we're probably gonna need to wrap this up. So Dan, go ahead.
I just have one park that hasn't been named yet, and that's Javier de la Vega Park. That's next to the I know it's close to Minnesota and International Airport Road, but it's not close to a neighborhood, and it's got a lot of land. And there's I know that there's ballparks and soccer fields there, but again, there's other areas there that could be used. And there, I don't know whether it's close to any bus routes or anything like that, but there are bike paths close by. And there could be transportation set up for that area. Just my thought.
Okay, good idea, Dan. Again, I don't know what specific. That's something, we still are going to, try and get our heads wrapped around is what specific areas, is there documentation of what other specific areas within the West Anchorage district, the West District, that we could see what was considered and what wasn't. And so I don't know if they considered that one. We'll have to find out. But that's a great suggestion to throw in the mix. So, okay, Pat.
You're muted, Pat.
Pat, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm on mute. Yeah, now I'm unmuted again. I see Matt Clayman's trying to come online. And the second is regarding Calithro Center, as several people have mentioned the distance. There is no bus service out there. It used to be a route that went to Calithro Center, but that was years ago. And this would have people having to walk, and walking is good for you, but they would have to either be using the coastal trail or the Northern Lights Trail to get out there. And there's a lot of wooded area in between that would be attractive for them to stop at and would impact the use of the trails, which are high use trails. And it's just, the Calithro Center is probably perfect for something, but it's not perfect for this particular type of shelter. Thank you.
Can I just address the distance real quick? So when we were talking about Clitheroe, it was very clear that it has, we specified a very small capacity for that site, and that it would be a dry, meaning alcohol and drug-free site. And for the folks that work with the unsheltered on a daily basis, which I do not, there are a lot of people who have jobs and have vehicles, maybe not great vehicles, but they have vehicles. And so in addition to just offering people safe parking, which was kind of what the thought was, if folks wanted to go out there and camp because it was the sanctioned dry site, that transport would be provided. So unlike Cuddy, which it's not Cuddy, it's the old National Archives site, which we identified as being a larger capacity of 75 to 100 people. Clitheroe was small, 30 people max.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Did somebody else besides Anna have their hand raised? Maybe not. Okay, Anna, I'll let you wrap up and then we need to move on.
Yeah, thank you. And I really appreciate the discussion and the thinking about alternatives. So I guess I just want to frame, so what's going to happen Tuesday? Well, first there's a work session tomorrow, and that is with all the assembly members, assuming that we all attend, I'll be there. And we're going to hear the recommendations from the task force and have a discussion or at least a presentation. Work sessions, we don't take action and we don't start debate. So it's really a question and answer, but it's a good informational opportunity. So we'll hear kind of where folks are at. And then some assembly members may say, what they're thinking initially. And then Tuesday at our regular meeting, I don't believe this has a public hearing. I'll have to check, but it will be discussed. And so we always welcome public testimony in writing as well, if it's not a public hearing item. And then I just want to frame kind of what this resolution is proposing to do is it's trying to make an initial decision or a policy call on just the idea of having a short-term sanctioned camp, one or more locations in the city, which is not what we have now, as Carolyn said, and Steph as well. And then it's recommending one or more locations so that locations could change, amendments could happen in the meeting, where this could be feasible. So it's not saying this is where it will happen. It is saying here's the list of sites that will be considered. And then the third piece is that it requests that the administration assess the feasibility of using these sites, how they could provide services, and then to come back with, for example, funding and things like how are we going to provide dumpsters and toilets, things like that. And so So it's really the first step, and that's why it's hard to answer a lot of detailed operations questions, because ultimately the responsibility for managing the site, standing it up, anything involving basically, the executive functions of the city is the administration. And so the assembly does not have a role. Ultimately, we can make policy, we can make recommendations, but ultimately the administration carries it out. So just to frame it, and then if we don't make that decision, the default outcome is what we have now. And so if we cannot come to agreement as a community, that's what we'll have for the foreseeable future is folks where they are now. So I just want to leave that and then let folks hopefully engage as they're able to.
Okay, thank you so much, Anna. Thank you, everybody. Okay, moving on, I want to go back to legislative reports since I believe Matt Clayman has joined us. So thank you, Matt. I appreciate you attending, and you want to take a few moments to provide your legislative report, that would be great. And you need to make sure that you unmute yourself.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. So kind of just briefly, I think you all have been following the real big news on Juneau was we actually, with only a 1-day special session, we passed a budget, which it was a balanced budget. It did not overdraw the percent of market value cap on funding coming from from earnings reserve. It did not involve a draw from the constitutional budget savings account. And it has an affordable dividend and the largest investment in public education in Alaska history, with approximately $680 per student. And that really came, I can't say it was consensus, but there really grew to be a broad support in the legislature in both the House and the Senate for what was effectively the Senate budget. Part of the way we put the whole budget together was coming together with some additional capital funds to help some of the members of the House that were having struggles supporting the budget, but we actually got there. And I think that was a real victory for Alaska. There were some additional legislative efforts, important legislation about postpartum insurance coverage that passed. There were some other measures that the work isn't done yet, and we'll continue with that next year. And mostly here to answer questions and hear any comments you may have.
Okay, well, thanks, Matt. Does anybody have any questions for Matt? No one? Okay, well, thank you for your hard work. And it seems like that there wasn't a lot of contention this year as in sometimes previous years, so that's good. It sounded like there was a lot of collaboration, which is always a good thing. So
well, I certainly think, Kathy, that the bipartisan majority in the Senate, with 17 of the 20 members in the Senate in the majority, what happened was, I think at some level we really did come together and build consensus on where we could find common ground. And then some of those arguments that you might have seen in the past, we didn't really hear about those because we figured out what we had in common rather than what divided us.
sounds like a plan.
So
sometimes that actually works.
well, we'll keep working at it. Okay,
well, you enjoy your summer, and thank you for all your work down there.
Absolutely. And is the council taking off now till September?
Right. We don't meet in July or August unless we schedule a special meeting for some reason, but our board and our land use committee are going to be highly active because there's so many things going on.
Okay, well, I'll be keeping an eye on it.
Okay, good enough. Okay, back to our regular agenda here. The next item on the agenda is consideration of approval of TCC comments on the Heritage Land Bank 2023 work program and 5-year master plan. And Carolyn, if you can screen share some bullet items, some bullet comments that attendees can take a look at. So every year, and we've been doing this for decades, we take a look at these proposed items within the HLB parcel or plan area. I don't even know what I'm trying to say anymore. And so I reviewed this draft plan and compared it to previous plans, and it's essentially the same. I'm recommending that there be consideration of approval on this because our comments are essentially the same. I didn't have a chance to go through word by word any policy changes, which is in the back of the document. I know that HLB Advisory Commission had looked at potential policy changes on a few things, but I couldn't track them when I was zooming in on their meeting because I was on the phone with somebody else as well. And so I'd like the opportunity to go ahead and have the leeway to take a look at those to see if there's any major changes. But otherwise, before I get more into this, if I could have a motion to approve the presented TCC talking points for comments to the draft 2023 work program and 5-year Heritage Land Bank management plan, that would be a good start. So
moved.
thanks, Dan. Do I hear a second?
Second, this is Kathleen.
Thank you, Kathleen. Okay.
If I may, since I moved this, one comment is the partial 4-045, which showed up on the plan this year. I didn't see it in previous plans, which is the one you have transfer of HLB land to Muni Parks and Rec. That is a new thing. I haven't seen it before. And but I'm supporting of it. I support it, and I'm glad that they want to move the management to, it's a wooded area and it's west of the nice homes there. So, and it's contiguous with the earthquake park, with the rest of earthquake park.
Okay, so yeah, I'll start from the top, just kind of covering these very quickly, and thanks for pointing that one out. Essentially, there's various places within the plan where they talk about acquiring municipal entitlement lands. So this goes back to the 1986 Municipal Entitlement Act, where land was transferred to the municipality. And so that was the impetus to create a heritage land bank until the city decided what to do with all this land they acquired back in the 80s. And there's certain parcels that are listed there on the share screen that we have continually asked for that they actually be transferred as part of that, because it's still state land, and we're looking to have that conveyed to the municipality. And that's been a long going decades request, because they're important areas in the West Anchorage area, and they're all, there's parks and what Point Warren's off Overlook. To have those actually be acquired by the municipality would be a positive thing for our community, certainly in West Anchorage. And also asking for the transfer of the snow dump that the Muni had been using, as Anna referred to, the Connors Bog snow dump area. I believe construction is going to start on that this summer, but I haven't really communicated with the Muni on that for quite some time, but that was the schedule. So I'm not sure if we still need that, but I think it would be a good thing to acquire it if we get 107.9 inches of snow on a regular basis in our winters now. And then there's also parcel 4-045 that Dan just referred to, that it may have been in a previous plan. I certainly was not aware of it. So I'm going to have to do a little research on that. But we looked at where they indicated it was located. It's east of Earthquake Park, west of Hood Creek, above Northern Lights, north of Northern Lights. And it is just, I don't know, a little wooded area that there's no reason for the Heritage Land Bank to still be sitting on that and not transfer it to to the Turnagain Community Council area and the municipality. Then under the category of trespass and encroachment, which I'm not sure why it was under that category, but this is not new. The exact wording that is on this document was last year's that we approved with regard to any kind of Tesoro-Nikiski pipeline easements, if they are trying to add to them or dig them up and redo them, that we just be consulted and that we, like consideration of any kind of input that that needs to be done if there's any proposal for them to put in more pipeline infrastructure down there by the coastal trail. And then as far as potential disposals, exchanges, and transfers, this is a long-standing thing. These are the HLB parcels west of the airport, including where the Clitheroe Center is located and where a sanctioned camp is being proposed. And these municipally owned areas serve a real vital area for that contiguous running of the coastal trail and natural wildlife habitat, natural open space, buffering for the trail. And so it really makes sense that they be added to the Parks Department management and hopefully dedicated park. And I worked with their Assemblyman Eric Croft several years ago to get the language that's in the document now every year, that at some point easements will be decided upon, and surveying, and a significant portion of all those areas would be transferred to the Parks Department. It's just a matter of funding, of when there would be funding to follow through with that. But it's been in the plan now since I think 2018, 19, I've lost track of time. So nothing new there. And if you could scroll down just a little bit, Carolyn, to the second page. So they did significantly edit out a lot of the really good language under land management and conservation easement management. And so last year we requested that original language that was in as near as 2020 that be added back into it. It was just a much more clear about conservation easement management within HLB land. And then, like I referred to, the policies, I'll take a closer look to see if there's anything that really deviates from the policies that have changed the same for decades. Does anybody have any questions with regard to any of those bullet points that I would then turn into more of a comment letter, but covering those topics? Does anybody have any questions? And Carolyn, can you take that off the screenshot now so that I can see any hands being raised? And okay, no questions? Okay, why don't we go ahead and take a vote? All in favor of Turnagain Community Council comments on the HLB 2023 work? Oh, Dan, are you?
No, I'm raising my hand to vote.
Oh, okay. Okay, 2023 work program and 5-year managed plan of the Heritage Land Bank, and I'll turn that into a comment letter and submit it before the comment deadline. So please raise your hand if you support this. Okay, let's see. I'll raise my hand here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, 8, 9. Any other yes votes? Got 9 yes votes. Okay, is anybody opposed? And everybody who voted yes, please lower your hand. Like, Pat, can you lower your hand, please? Thank you. Any no? Anybody opposed to these comments moving forward? I don't see any. Okay, so that's great. So that passes. Thank you. We'll move on to the next agenda item, which is also an approval consideration of the idea of an idea that I came up with. So just a little bit of background. we got notification from the municipality a few months ago that it's time to do the 10-year community council boundary review, go through that, a formal process. It has to be done every 10 years per municipal code. And there were an opportunity for just individuals to submit comments. And one of them was with regard to Turnagain, that they like to see Spenard Beach Park go back to Spenard. And that makes sense. It's called Spenard Beach Park. When Midtown Community Council was created 10 years ago, it took up some of Spenard's council boundary areas. So then in turn, to draw up new boundaries, they took Spenard got some of Turnagain eastern boundary areas. And so to kind of compensate for the loss of land in our boundary area, they redrew the boundaries. We didn't ask for it, but they redrew the boundaries and included Spenard Beach Park in Turnagain Community Council. Since then, fast forward, the Community Council really took the lead for a couple, 3 years and worked to get some improvements done at that park. We collaborated with the airport because this is on airport property. Spenard helped out with us on that, Community Council. And so, and that was only phase 1 that got done last summer in August. We hope to continue to provide amenities, and the airport is okay with that. So I just came up with the idea of, I think it would be unconventional. I don't think this has ever been proposed before, but the actual Spenard Turnagain boundaries actually overlap just over Spenard Beach Park, so that we could continue looking after that park in a collaborative way. So Spenard hasn't really discussed this yet. I've been in discussions with Peggy Oth, who is on the board of Spenard and is taking the lead on this effort for Spenard. So we collaborated and we decided, let's see if we can't get moving forward this idea. So what's on the agenda tonight is just consideration of approval of the idea of doing it. Doesn't mean it'll happen, doesn't mean it'll get accepted, but just so that then we're on record of supporting this idea or not moving forward, and we can convey that to Spenard Community Council. So can I have a motion from somebody to that Turnagain Community Council supports the idea of our council boundary and Spenard council boundary overlapping each other with Spenard Beach Park?
This is Pat. I so move.
Oh, thank you, Pat. Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Thanks, John. Okay, is there any questions or discussion about this idea?
I just think it's a good idea. I mean, over the years, it just makes sense. It's both of us, both community councils, and it serves both areas. So let's do it and not have any more arguments about who handles Spenard Beach Park.
That's right. And I promise that we probably, or maybe I shouldn't promise, but I doubt if there will be any kind of effort moving forward to call it, Turnagain.
No. It's Spenard. It's Spenard.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? No. Okay, then let's go ahead and take a vote. And so all in favor of the motion to support the idea of Turnagain and Spenard sharing the boundaries of Spenard Beach Park as request for that action by the municipality. Okay, let's see. Let me get my vote down here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I've got 7 votes. Anybody else? 8. Anybody else? Okay, I've got 8 yes. Does anybody oppose that idea?
Let me find my.
And everybody lower your hand if you voted yes. Okay, Carolyn and Stephanie, are you yes votes or no votes? Oh, no. Okay. And Stephanie, you're a no vote as well? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, that passes. And we'll move on to the next agenda item. Let's see. This is not something that we'll be voting on. If you'll recall from our May meeting, we formed a capital improvement committee that the base is the board, and then any other volunteers that would like to join in on the committee to review the projects that we have ranked for many, many years to try and get funded, both roads and drainage and also parks and rec. And so we had some volunteers, which I really appreciate. I take full responsibility. The idea was for the committee to meet during May and have recommendations to vote on for. Hi, how are you doing? Is that a yes vote or a no vote from him? So that we could make recommendations and have the council vote on them like we typically do at our June meeting, because comments are due on June 15th. I take full responsibility for not being able to pull a meeting together and get something organized for our committee to have that discussion and have the committee come up with some recommendations. And so I apologize. So we won't be voting on anything this evening, because I still want the opportunity for the committee, especially since we had three new volunteers that wanted to be a part of this process in addition to board members. And so the idea is just to let you know that the committee will get a meeting scheduled. I'll take responsibility for that. Hopefully sometime next week, we'll have our discussion. It's very likely that we will stick with something close to what we have approved last year and in the past, because consistency with this process is really, really important. But we will have that discussion and go through the list. And because the bylaws allow the board to go ahead and approve any committee recommendation, we can go ahead and get that submitted before the June 15th deadline. And then when we meet again, which is likely September 1st, we'll have to ratify what the board approved. So this is a good opportunity for anybody else who wants to have a say in what we submit June 15th to volunteer to be a part of the ranking committee. So is anybody that didn't volunteer last time? Tatiana, she did, and Dan Rogers, and trying to think of the other person who volunteered. There's another new member, Karen. I don't remember her last name, but Karen, who lives on West 30th and was concerned about the Lloyd Still soccer user issues. All three of them volunteered to be on the committee, and I really appreciate that, to get new people involved. So is there anybody else here that would like to join that committee, that ad hoc committee? Steve, okay, you're on it. Anybody else? Okay, well, we'll get something scheduled next week. And like I said, the next step will then be submittal by the board, and then we'll ratify it in the fall. So thank you for your patience, and I appreciate the willingness to do it that way. Okay, so we'll move on to TCC committee reports, just our land use committee. And John, I'm going to have you go ahead and take the lead on most of these things, because you've got more information than I do on some of them.
Okay, well, I will go ahead. The things we're going to cover quickly are what's going on with a couple of municipal code changes. There was a work session today on the site access development standards. And then last assembly meeting, there was an introduction of an ordinance to consolidate the residential zoning districts. I'll talk about those. And then a quick update on the Fish Creek Trail project. So with regard to the site access plan, this was an item that was heard in February, was sent back to the planning department for additional work, and there was a work session today. And it essentially comes up with some site access requirements for what's called the urban neighborhood context area, which was identified in the 2040 land use plan. And the portion of TCC that's in this area is everything between Northern Lights and Spenard Road and between Wisconsin and Minnesota. So it's a relatively small area, but there are people who will be affected. And this does three things. It formalizes the boundaries of the urban neighborhood context area. It improves site access for pedestrians and alternative transportation. It right sizes driveway, alley access and circulation standards, and it consolidates and simplifies regulations. It will not take effect until 2024. These all seem to be, relatively reasonable things. It will have the most impact on multifamily residential projects, and potentially what might occur at some place like of Woodland Park. One of the things that I think was unfortunate, and I even think Anna saw some of this when she was president of the council, is we just seem to get very late notice of some of these actions, don't get involved in the early stages, or it's very hard to track and find where they occur. And so, for example, for the site access ordinance, there were 4 small focus group meetings that were held in January that included builders, designers, and urban neighborhood representatives. Only the South Addition, the Fairview, and the downtown were engaged, even though this affects neighborhoods across Anchorage. And somehow I think there has to be a better job of us getting notified and the opportunity of being involved early in some of the discussions of this ordinance. And I hope Anna can help with that. One of the things Chris Constant made as an observation during this is he felt the assembly was being regularly asked to take actions without understanding the consequences. And some of these actions have very good intentions, but some of the consequences are not well understood. And for example, there have been some ordinances passed that had to do with reducing on-site parking. And now the Muni is going to send out an RFP to look at what are the implications of some of these recently passed ordinances on managing rights of way within the Muni. And again, I think that's something we want to keep an eye on and perhaps have some involvement in. The second thing, which is somewhat along these lines about when we're notified and how we get involved, is the ordinance that was introduced by Meg Zalatel and Kevin Cross last assembly meeting, which proposes to consolidate all the R zoning districts into 2 districts, one which is those that are attached to city services and those which are not attached to city services. And it's a relatively short ordinance without a lot of details, but the implications are that it would combine all the R1, R2, R3, R4 into one zoning district, and it would also allow some commercial and business development activities that occur in that. Another thing that's a bit alarming about that would be waiving planning commission review of these actions. This thing is scheduled for a work session on the 25th, it's scheduled to be heard as a public hearing on the 25th of July. There'll likely be a work session before that. And when I talked to the planning department, by surprise, they were not involved and they haven't taken a position. So this is something that has a very potentially significant impact across Anchorage. And I would like to hope there's a way that we can be involved, it can be slowed down a little bit, and there can be some thought put into this. I think what comes out of this is that there's a lot of recent municipal ordinances that have really good intentions, reducing the cost of housing, making more available affordable housing, simplifying regulations, eliminating unnecessary requirements, improving pedestrian access and safety, making it easier to use public transit, and making Anchorage a more attractive place. And I just think there's a way that we somehow have to find earlier notice, have the ability to get involved, and perhaps Anna will have some ideas on that. And so I'll maybe jump into the last one, and then maybe Anna has some thoughts that she might want to add to this. The last one is the update on the Fish Creek Trail Connection project. And we've seen nothing on their website. It hasn't changed since the first of the year. And so I contacted the project manager for DOT. And he said things have slowed down. They're waiting to finalize their contract with CRW, which will involve doing some new surveying, some new wetlands delineation, and some geotechnical investigations of some of the routes without specifying what those are. He also said that they are going ahead with their environmental compliance for the project. And they had early on suggested, and I asked if this was the case, were they still going with what's called a categorical exclusion, which is the simplest and quickest method of NEPA compliance. And he said yes. We as a council, many others have suggested that given the significance of the impacts, it should be an environmental assessment. I asked when that categorical exclusion might be available. He said not until the wetlands delineations are done, so probably midsummer. I also asked if we disagreed with it being a categorical exclusion, if we could appeal that. He also said yes. So this is something we want to keep an eye on. And I know that you have people like John Haxby and Jamie Linksweiler and others who are keeping an eye on this. But this may be something as we have some land use committee meetings coming up early summer to deal with things like the airport, deal with things like the ordinances and how we get involved with those with municipality and the Fish Creek Trail. These were topics we'll want to discuss. So I think with that sort of quickly, and I guess Kathy, we have no update on Woodland Park other than the fact that they've been doing some investigations on site to kind of look at potentially contamination and buried structures and things.
Yeah, I mean, that I had talked to JJ Brooks before our May meeting, and that's what he had indicated, that in mid-May they would be doing some boring samples for looking at stability of that area, the soils, and doing some imaging to see if there was any kind of foundational stuff, riprap, any of that from previously developed areas prior to when it was all cleared out to widen Northern Lights, and all that was set aside for right away for use for park purposes. But I contacted him a few days ago and I have not heard back from him. So I don't have any update to provide. But I know he gets my messages. And so I think if there would have been any news that he would want the council to have, that he would want to share, he would have gotten back to me before today. So
Okay.
we'll just have to keep communication lines open with him to see what may be happening. They
So
may
Kathy,
just still be analyzing the results of those studies that were done in May.
Kathy, I spoke to him yesterday.
Oh, Steve, that's right. Steve is our inside guy with JJ.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. Steve, fill us in.
I talked to him a little while ago, also about, hey, how about having some free spruce trees for potentially for that development? What he just said is that he's working on replatting those lots over there. And that was the latest. He didn't say any more about the, doing differences with, I guess they're all marked out on the alleyway regarding the different kinds of sewer and lighting and gas locates. So primarily the latest is his platting, and I'm not sure whether that means that he's full bore ahead going with us or not, but that's all I know.
I think if he is replatting them, it would be interesting to see what he is proposing for the replat. And certainly it would be something that would go before the platting board that we would want to participate in, because that's where a lot of the conditions on development, easements and things like that are laid out. So we don't want to let that go too far without potentially having a more detailed conversation with him. Yep. So I've thrown out a lot of things there. I don't know, maybe see if Anna has any questions, particularly about the, or comments about some of the changes in municipal ordinances, but then maybe see if there are other questions.
Yeah,
Okay,
sure. Just be really brief. I mean, so, and I put in the chat, I also need to read these ordinances, and I know there's others coming down the pike. One is, for example, to allow for triplexes and fourplexes to be considered residential standards as opposed to commercial. So making it easier to build those things. Anyway, there's a lot going on. And then I also noted the one about the 2 residential zones. I haven't read that one and was not involved in that discussion, but it's coming up in late July. Yeah, and I imagine there's going to be other discussions because everybody's trying to, get their heads around how we can improve our code. So, so that's the only comments I have at this point.
Anything you can do to give us a heads up about work sessions or things going on, because I think if there isn't the opportunity to be in a focus group where some of these things are being crafted, we would really like to be involved as compared to finding out about it when it comes before the assembly. So just a request.
No, I appreciate that. And yeah, on the 2 residential zones one, that one got introduced and didn't have any work sessions as far as I know. So just on that particular point, but yeah, heard. I will keep an ear out.
Okay. Any other questions from anybody in the land use report? And feel free to contact me afterwards. I do think, Kathy, we should have there'll be a number of meetings we need to set up with the land use committee on a couple of these topics. So we're going to try to do that hopefully in June. And we had the suggestion of getting the word out to the general distribution list of TCC for those who want to attend. So I think we can work on that.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. Once we pick a time and date and place, then we can let people know that what the agendas are going to be. I think, yeah, with everything going around, Anna said that there's more changes coming, but like John had said, the planning department wasn't even behind this consolidation of our zoning district. So they certainly was, and that's when Tom Davis, when the ADU code changes were coming through, and others that the land use committee worked on for months, and I think Tom Davis came twice to us for a couple of these things at our land use committee level, and yet they're not even behind this particular one. Do you know who's initiating? When you say there's a lot more coming through, is it being initiated by the planning department, or is it just coming from other sources?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the item. And I know, I mean, these are just things I've heard from other members. Obviously, the Open Meetings Act means that only 3 assembly members can discuss business on any particular item outside of a public meeting. So I can either share what I've heard in public meetings or things that I'm involved in, which is not, there's none of them that I'm involved in right now. But there's a Title 21 changes omnibus is the way it's been described, like a bigger set of changes. That's at the Planning and Zoning Commission. I haven't read that one yet either. It's supposed to come to the Assembly soon. And I can't speak to what process that's gone through because I'm just, again, catching up because there's a whole lot going on. The one that is sponsored by Cross and Zalatel, that one, as far as I know, they worked on it, so I don't know what the process was. I don't believe planning was involved in that. Beyond that, I know the 3 and 4plex one that I mentioned, that one is coming out soon. That one was collaboration with the planning department and so on. But again, Open Meetings Act, I don't know anything beyond what's been shared in public meetings so far. And so the other general recommendation I would make is to touch base with Tom or someone else in the planning department and just kind of ask what they have in the pipe, because a lot of things they initiate and then they're going through their process, and then the assembly doesn't get actively involved until later. And so
Sure, yeah.
So good suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, it does feel chaotic, and it kind of is, but part of it is just a function of the Open Meetings Act, unfortunately. So
Point of order.
Well, I guess the only other thing I would say is, I personally representing Turnagain Community Councils, but I know a lot of others throughout the community put in their heart and soul into the update of the 2040 master plan, or excuse me, land use plan. And, I'd have to go back to see what all was in there because there's a ton of stuff. And I'm just not, I know that compliance to the land use plan is kind of thrown around like this is to implement the land use plan. But I'm not sure if that's completely accurate on some of these proposals. That may just be a kind of a crutch to lean on to justify some of these. But I think it would behoove the land use committee, those actively involved, to take a look at that land use plan.
Yep.
Just, remind ourselves what all was in it. So, because a lot of work went into it.
Dan has his hand up.
Too, so, okay.
Point of order.
Dan, you have your, yes.
We need to either move to extend or shut down this meeting.
Okay. And actually somebody said, I don't know where I heard it, but that's not actually not a thing to move to extend. The meeting is open until it's closed, until it's adjourned. Just because it's published that we go till 9 doesn't mean that we have to end at 9. But
done.
Well, I'll just share, on the assembly, we do have set end dates, not just for regular meetings, but for our work sessions. So we do regularly vote to extend, in that we follow Robert's rules.
I'm thinking that was talked about at the last FCC delegate meeting, but I don't remember. I think, oh yeah, I think it was brought up at the last FCC delegate meeting, but I don't believe that we have any other agenda items to cover. So if there's no objection,
I move to adjourn.
I will, thank you, because that's just what I was going to ask for. Thank you. Any objection? No, okay. Thank you guys all so much for attending. Enjoy your summer. Stay involved with the council if you can through the land use committee because we'll be busy this summer. So thank you very much.
Thanks all.
Thank you guys for letting me
Thank
be a
you.
part of your meetings. I
Thank you,
appreciate
Megan.
it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Megan.